John, welcome aboard to the show. So happy to have you here with us today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
We're not going to mince meat. I'm just going to throw the hard questions right at you. Um, your wife and you separately had went through the hard experience of shutting down a business. And maybe before we get to that, the whole experience and how it feels before that, maybe a year before or 6 months. There's a lot of magic around entrepreneurship, but I want to explore the dark side of that for a moment together with you.
I have another company where we talk to churches a lot, and we kept going to churches. And every time I would walk into a church, I'm in the southeast, and I'd walk in and I'd meet church secretary. Typically, her name is Brenda, and Brenda is a sweet old lady, calls you sweetheart all the time. You walk in, you tell Brenda you're there to meet with whoever, and she comes back with a cup of coffee because it's the South again, and we're all hospitable around here. And you take a sip, and you really, really hate meeting Brenda for a second because it's awful. Church coffee sucks. And the business idea was to create a network of churches that got fresh roasted coffee drop shipped to them every Sunday. And it was a fun idea. The branding was really fun to build out. But as we went along, the churches that we would get on, and we would get businesses and individuals as well, we would get them off of Folgers because we Folgers is our enemy, and they would stick with us for about 2 to 3 months, and then they drop off. And this happened consistently for about a year. And we would send them a survey like, hey, we noticed you left. Can you tell us why? And over again, they would tell us, oh, we really love your product. We really love what you're doing, but we found someone local. So my coffee company kind of became like the gateway drug to other local coffee companies. So uh, in quarter 1 of this year, I was looking back, and we sold more in t-shirts than we did in coffee. And it just wasn't, we were right on the edge of being profitable again. And it was like too close. And I was like, all right, I'm not gonna waste my time. So there's a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration there. But at the same time, I appreciate the experience. You know, it,
So hold
every
on, before
failure is,
before we get to that, I want to
yeah.
go there. But before we go there, when you're 3 months, 6 months, you're starting to see the signals. What kind of effect does that have on you, on family? I'm assuming put a couple 10, 20, 30, $40,000 down on the business that you understand that you may not recoup. How does that kind of affect the whole environment?
Yeah, how it works for me is I've shut down multiple companies, and every single time I hit that point, I'm like, okay, like this isn't gonna work. I get really frustrated for about 2 or 3 days, and I'm kind of like, get that anger and that kind of, for me, I feel it in my gut, and it kind of boils a little bit. Uh, and I'll sit on it for a couple of days, and after you go through it once or twice, you kind of accept that this is just a process. Um,
What was
it's not
that?
what you,
What was the first time like? Because I've done the same, right?
yeah.
Serial entrepreneur myself, right there with you. But that first time until you kind of get it is different, isn't it?
Yeah, that first time really hurts. The first time was I had this idea in college, right? The very stereotypical entrepreneur founding story. Had this idea in college. I had some buddies. We worked on it together, and at one point we had 9 different developers working on the SaaS product for email security, and it was unique. There's nothing like it on the market, and we were looking at, okay, we're going to set a launch date out a few months, trying to work on that strategy. And then a major competitor, one of the big boys in the email security space, came out with a new, for them, was just a new feature on what they already had, which is very, very similar to what we had. And so we lost that first mover advantage. It's like this, no reasonable company organization is going to pay us on top of what they already have, since there's a, a service out there that offers all of it in one. So that was hard to swallow for sure. That took about a week to kind of just
What was the
process.
dynamics between yourself and the other co-founders basically at that stage when that kind of hit?
Yeah, the dynamic I think was very healthy overall, because we all understood we're working on this, but this is a startup and it may not work out. right? None of us had, I don't think, delusions of grandeur, like we're gonna be millionaires overnight. Like, no, we all knew it could potentially not work out. So just being transparent with the team, talking about, okay, here's where we're at, here's what we're looking at. And eventually it was kind of a universal decision from the leadership, myself, my primary co-founder, and then the CTO. We're like, yeah, this isn't something we're going to really be able to do. So we put the whole project on ice. We might resurrect it one day, looking at some other things potentially down the road. But I mean, we were just like, this is dead. And everyone, I think, walked away understanding, like, okay, we gave it our best shot, didn't work out, and that's okay. And I mean, I'm still really good friends with all the people that we worked with, and I still communicate with them regularly. And some of them ask me what my next idea is going to be.
So I'll tell you, you got lucky, let's call it that, because there's a
Yep.
lot of stories that do not end like that. And in fact, the businesses going south can wreck families and can have huge community impacts. So I would say that's probably a best case scenario. But what's interesting is that with each one of your, let's call them your failures, you learn some really interesting business knowledge, strategic experience, right? That one's all about not being in front of the steamroller. That's what us entrepreneurs call it. Which is really, if your idea is about something that a huge, behemoth can easily add on, then it's all about barrier to entry and all those kind of strategic discussions. So, and you learn that at such a young age, which to me is just brilliant. So I absolutely love that. And also, let me just say thank you for your honesty and humbleness. A lot of entrepreneurs will never tell you that, yes, I've had a lot of success, but half of what I've done, if not more, has failed. And that's our secret that we not all of us will admit. So let me just set expectations for the audience that this is incredibly humble and vulnerable that you're sharing this information, because we hear all the success stories, we don't have to share the failures, and I think they're more interesting. When you look in retrospect, how do you see your failures or the businesses that just didn't pan out? What did you learn from them?
Yeah, I see them as stepping stones to somewhere I'm still going. I don't feel like I have achieved what I want to achieve in the business world yet, but there's definitely a lesson. And what's really been interesting for me is as I've gone along and I've built these businesses and I've met these people and had conversations with them, I still end up they end up coming back around like a couple years later and helping me in a different way with a different business somewhere else. And it's been really interesting just to see how everything always works out for a reason. And the story of my life is still being written. And I'm okay with some chapters having failures because I know I can write the next one.
This is such an important point. I mean, you're nonchalantly saying this, but the skill to learn something from a failure, but also maintain those relationships is actually a really important thing, right? So what you're describing, I would argue, is something that every entrepreneur should master to basically leverage their failures into successes in the future, because I think that's really important. So thank you for sharing that. Throughout your journeys, you have become a wizard in marketing, lead generation through the art of storytelling.
Yes.
I wanna keep this at the level of new entrepreneur that is maybe 18-year-old and they're gonna do something, but maybe 20-something-year-old or 30-something-year-old and they're kind of sick of corporate, but they've never done the marketing sales themselves.
Mm.
What are the ABCs to think about growth in under this framework?
But your foundations have to be solid. And your foundations is what problem you solve, who you solve it for, and how do you uniquely solve it in your messaging. And there are actually three types of problems that you have to figure out how you solve. You have an internal problem, an external problem, and a philosophical problem. The external problem is what's going on in the world around you. So for me, the coffee company is people are going, and I'm kind of the gateway drug for other small roasters local to these churches. How I feel about that is I'm frustrated. I'm a little annoyed. That's how I feel about it. It's the negative feeling that I have. It's the problem feeling. The philosophical feeling is my business shouldn't fail. The philosophical problem is my business shouldn't fail because I put so much time and effort into it. Right? That's how you could summarize that situation. Now, if you're someone who wants to start a business, you need to identify what's the external problem that you solve, what's the internal problem that external problem is causing, and then why is that a problem worth solving? Right? Because I don't mean this in a bad way, but not all problems are worth solving. Some problems are, just kind of push through it and get over it. But there are lots of problems out there worth solving. And I was actually speaking to the USC, University of South Carolina School of Business, some of their senior entrepreneurship classes yesterday. And one thing I was telling them is you need to find a problem that you're passionate about. And either it can be a chip on your shoulder problem, or it can be something you've experienced problem. And so chip on your shoulder problem for me, my first company was an email security company, and my grandma had been scammed by email. I had friends that had been scammed via email multiple times, and their grandmas got scammed. And, that made me angry. It pissed me off. And so that I kind of had this chip on my shoulder about solving that problem. Find a problem you're passionate about, and then build your messaging around what the problem is, why this problem is important, and how are you uniquely going to solve it.
So I want to break that down. Why is it important for it to be your problem? Why can't you just find a problem that makes great sense and looks like there's a good business case, there's money behind it? Why do you have to have that chip on your shoulder?
Because if you're not passionate about the problem you solve, no one will buy from you. If you're just doing something for money, your customers will smell it. People can tell. People have an instinct of this person is just in it for money. They're not actually in it for an ulterior motive and a positive motive. And I think there's a great book called To Sell is Human. And what I took away from that book was selling is relational and humans are relational. And if we feel like you're being phony, if you're not being real with me, I'm probably not going to buy from you. And that's why I say the problem has to be personal. You have to actually care about the people you're serving and the problem you're solving.
That is such an important point that I think is not talked about enough. The one side of that is that startups and businesses, it gets tough. So actually caring about what you're doing is incredibly helpful. But the other thing is absolutely like if you don't care about this deeply, your customers are going to sniff it. Then they're going to feel it, and you're going to feel it. So that's such an important thing. I appreciate it. When you think about you have a problem, it's your problem. You feel that you feel it, right? How do we basically go? What are the tools, techniques, or methods that you can think about how to share your story with the world?
Yeah, so when I do marketing strategy, I look at there are three types of opportunities. There are amplification, optimization, and differentiation opportunities to help you get your message out. Amplification is one to many. And that can be, advertising. That can be your personal network. That can be strategic partnerships and referral agreements. Optimization is making sure that everything you have is actually built to be as efficient and effective as possible. Because the euphemism I like to use in marketing that most businesses, the mistake that they make is they kind of just throw it like spaghetti against the wall and hope it sticks. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just like, oh, I saw a TikTok about this new thing, and so I'm going to go do that. And entrepreneurs are kind of squirrel brained. I think we're a little, we want to do a million different things at once. And that's a problem. That in and of itself is a problem. That's why you have to pick one problem that you solve, and then you need to focus all of your messaging around that. And then you need to build systems optimized around your process to solve that problem. A very common example is going to be like an email nurture campaign. If someone downloads like a lead generator or signs up for a webinar, how do you then continue to stay in contact with them to build trust? That's typically through email nurture. That's going to be a very easy optimization. Also, your website needs to tell a story. If your website isn't built in the formula of story, your customers are going to have a hard time understanding what problem you solve and how you help them and what you want them to do. And then differentiation. There's a great example of differentiation called the Savannah Bananas. I'm not a baseball fan, but anyone that's moderately a baseball fan has heard of the Savannah Bananas, and the founder of the Savannah Bananas runs around in a bright yellow tuxedo. I could never wear a bright yellow tuxedo, but they play the game of baseball so different that you have to take notice, even if you're not a baseball fan like myself. How can you be different? How can you get different and stand out from everybody else? And there's, tactics and all that stuff about how you can do that. But you need to be unique. If, let's say, coming into a crowded market like coffee, right? There's a million local coffee roasters. How did we stand out? How are we different? And we were different because we just beat on church coffee. Church coffee sucks was our tagline. And we sold, in our last quarter, we sold more in t-shirts that said church coffee sucks than we sold actual coffee, which is hilarious. But you got to find something that helps you stand out, that helps you be unique. So when you're talking about putting your message as a business owner, you need to be intentional in how you talk about yourself, how you show yourself, what you're branding. All that needs to be unique because people will talk about what you're doing.
So there's so many ways that you can get out there to your customers. You can do, email campaigns. You can start a newsletter in various different ways. You can go on Substack. You can write content. You can send out snail mail, right? It's the, spam mail in the actual, post office. That's a real thing still happening.
Mm-hmm.
How do I kind of analyze and think, well, I can't do all of this together. I'm probably not going to do a very good job if I try to do everything. And it's going to be costly to do that. Paid ads, right? LinkedIn, Facebook. I mean, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
How do I decide what my strategy should be?
That's a great question. And my solution is what I call the growth marketing strategy framework. And it's a 6-part framework that touches on what I call the 6 pillars of strategic marketing. You need to identify your goals. What are your goals for your business? What are your goals that are about your bottom line, that are tied to your bottom line success? Because a lot of people will get kind of tied up in, oh, I want to go viral. I want to go viral. I want to go viral. I can't even tell you how many times I've heard, I want to go viral. It drives me nuts. Viral is not a success metric. Viral is also intangible. We don't have, who defines what viral is, right? If you have 5 views on one and 500 on the other, did you go viral or not? That's a question you got to ask yourself. But really, you need to set goals that are meaningful, that are tied to bottom line results. Then you need to look at your revenue. What products or services sell the most, sell the easiest, and are the most profitable? And can you sell more of that?
So this connects also to your previous point, and you didn't say it, but that's what you were meaning about A/B testing and optimization of seeing what works. So this is what we call the vanity metrics. Mm-hmm. And what's really important about what you're saying is you're saying, look, you need to find the method that converts into bottom line money, basically.
Yes.
And finding that might mean doing a few experiments in a few channels. But how do I know if I'm getting my channel wrong or if I'm getting my messaging wrong? Like there's so many things that I can get wrong. How do I distill that?
You always start with messaging first. Your messaging needs to be on point. If your messaging isn't simple, clear, and compelling, people aren't going to listen. People aren't going to care. People aren't going to buy. If your messaging is cute and clever, and you're trying to be this kind of enigma or interesting character, people might be entertained, but they're not going to care. They're not going to want to buy from you if they don't know what you're doing for them. So your messaging always comes first, without a doubt. Your messaging and then your branding. And then you can move into, okay, what avenues, what channels do I need to work on in order to grow the business? Now, if you're just getting started, start with your personal network. Later on in my framework, I'll talk about what assets you have, what assets you need, and what assets you should optimize. If you have a really big network, a really large network of relationships, and you have friends that know people, that's an asset. And you need to learn how to use that asset to help you grow your business. And that's what I call a soft asset, is your relationship, your reputation, your conversational skills. Those are important. And you really need to focus on those kind of first That's what we call low hanging fruit, right? Who's going to buy from you first? Start with those people. Like at my coffee company, my grandma is my longest running subscriber. And I think her last order just went out today as we're in the process of closing it down. She's my first and best customer because I don't want to call her low hanging fruit, but she's that person who wants to support me, right? And in order to get that momentum going, because if you don't have cash in the door, your momentum is going to stall real quick. Start on your low hanging fruit. Once your messaging is clear, start with your low hanging fruit. Who do you know? Who do you know who knows who you want to talk to? And just make sure that you're genuine about it.
How does that tie into testing your messaging? Should you always be, and maybe we should take a step back and explain what A/B testing even is, but how do we approach finding good and efficient messaging? And what does that even mean?
So for me, the most effective messaging that I found is through using the story brand framework. That is a 7-part messaging framework that is designed to help you clarify your message and then craft it in the formula of story. Because stories have a formula. If you go watch enough movies and if you watch enough TV shows, you're like, oh, that character's going to die. Oh, they're going to get married. Like you sit there, with whoever, and you start to know what's going to happen because formulas are formulaic, but they're formulaic on purpose because they work. And stories have been the same formula through all of recorded history, right? And so I use the story brand framework because it helps me identify who the hero of the story is. The hero is the customer. What do they care about? And then how can I craft my messaging around them and bring them through this transformational journey where I take them from where they are now when they interact with me to some aspirational identity that I'm trying to sell them. So go for their coffee company, rest in peace. It goes from, church coffee sucks, bad coffee every Sunday to having a heavenly experience. Right. And then you can tie that into community and you can tie that into all these other things.
And this in marketing is literally called the hero messaging, right? That's
Yes.
what we've called it. But before we get to the marketing aspects of which is incredibly important, what are these kind of base stories? Why do they work? What are these classical archetype stories? Why do they translate? Why do they work in movies? Why do they work in marketing?
That's a really great question. And the hero's journey is the quintessential story time of all time, right? You got the hero's journey where they're going from something to something. You're going to have stories about people sacrificing themselves for the greater good for somebody else. You're going to have tragedies. People like tragedies and people like horror movies, which to me is like an adjacent to tragedies. Like, why do they like them? And it's because you get invested emotionally. Like every good story is going to pull you in emotionally at the beginning. And that's because someone wants to be something, wants to do something, wants to be with someone, and something is in their way. And there has to be stakes in any good story. If there's not clearly defined stakes, someone can lose something, we're not going to care, right? If Liam Neeson's daughter got kidnapped again, for the 20th time, and the kidnapper calls and says, hey, just so you know, we picked your daughter up from the park in Paris and she's okay. And we're actually at getting coffee at blah, blah, blah cafe. That's not a good movie. No one's going to watch that. There has to be stakes. And everyone's story has stakes, right? You and I want to get somewhere in life. And there's a million things in our way. What story can we tell to our customers where we clearly identify what's in their way and then we're going to solve it? Right? The archetype of stories always goes back to identifying a problem and then getting through that. And it's the struggle. I think it's just, and that's a parallel to life. We want to feel like we can succeed and we have hope in life. And I think that's why stories of all types are important, because even the story where someone dies or sacrifices themselves for the greater good, that gave that person purpose, a really powerful purpose. The romance tragedies, well, they died for love. And no one's going to argue that that's not a good story, right? Or the journey.
So here's the thing, right? I think the audience is getting it, that we as human beings profoundly resonate with these narratives that come in these story forms, which make us feel. They make us feel hopeful. They make us feel the struggle. And then it just connects us to like, oh, like I've been there, I'm doing that, this is happening to me right now. So suddenly it's personal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we get it. We've all seen good movies. We've all cried and laughed in a movie. How do we make that transition into marketing? Now we don't have a 60 minutes or 90 minutes or Marvel 3 hours, and Marvel's are not good story, but anyway, we won't go there. How do we translate 90 minutes into 30 seconds, maybe?
Yeah. So what I would do is create what we call a one-liner. Now, a one-liner in your brand messaging is problem first, who you are, why you're uniquely positioned to solve it, and then your aspirational identity. So I'll read you my one-liner I just put together. I gotta read it because I just changed it a little bit. So this is marketing for me. Most organizations feel like they're guessing with their marketing dollars. As a creator of the marketing strategy framework and a StoryBrand certified coach, I've guided businesses from 3 million to 25 in less than 3 million to 25 million in less than 2 years by optimizing their branding, messaging, and marketing strategy, because every organization needs marketing that works. That's a story, right? And it's super compact, it's super tangible, and makes people go, oh, okay, I know what you do. I know why you're the one to help me. And then I know why you're doing it, because every organization needs marketing that works, right? And any business, no matter if you're HVAC, plumbing, investors, banking, insurance, you can boil down what you do to a problem first statement, identifying your credibility and why you are the one to solve it, and then the why. Simon Sinek wrote a great book called Start With Why. And before you read pretty much any other book, business or life, I think Start With Why is a really great one, because you need to have the why, and then boil down your statement. You can boil down your story of 90 minutes into 30 seconds. And in movies, they call that a one-liner, right? So, I almost said Stargate. Man, that made me feel old. In Star Wars, which isn't much better. In the original trilogy, Luke Skywalker is an orphan boy on a desert planet who wants to overcome the evil empire and has to become a Jedi and save the galaxy. Right? You can boil that down into a small one-liner.
This narrative of good versus evil, which many of these superheroes are all about, it's a very powerful narrative. It's one that we want to connect to naturally. We want it to be black and white. We want it to be about, oh, we're helping the light overcome the dark. It's used in movies. It's used in marketing. It's used in politics. It's another really powerful narrative that people use to advance whatever their cause might be. So I appreciate that. Okay. I've come up with my elevator pitch, my one-liner. Elevator pitch is what we call it as entrepreneurs, one-liner, whatever it is. How do you test it? How do you know if it works or not?
So, I mean, you already said it, A/B testing, right? If you have, I have my one-liner on the back of my business card. Some people will put their one-liner in their email signature, on their website. If you just go to a networking event, and you have a one-liner, and then you go to another networking event the next night and you use a different one-liner, see which one gets the most interest. Keep track of how many times someone says, oh, that's interesting, can I get your business card? Or, oh, that's interesting, tell me more. Right? You just got to test it. And you can't know 100%, but you can get in that ballpark initially.
So this is so important, right? This idea that you're going to purposefully try out something and you're going to somehow count a metric, which is going to tell you, is this working or not? And you're going to compare it to another one where you're going to count the metric and be like, oh, 30 people were like, tell me more, as opposed to 10 people were like, tell me more. And then you're like, oh, this is much better. I wonder why. Like, what did I do very well there? This is like, there's no magic. There's no experts who can do this perfectly without ever trying. But there is a methodology where you can test and refine and experiment and get better, no matter who you are, no matter where you're starting from. So this philosophy that you're describing of incremental improvement and learning is just so incredibly important. And from my personal stories, the things that I thought would be successful are no. Like, even with all our experience, sometimes we're surprised and then we need to ask ourselves, well, why did that work? I didn't think it would. Right. And you suddenly get shitty conversion rates or great conversion rates, and you need to really think about, well, What is it about this person, this persona, this customer that worked when I didn't think it would, or vice versa.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
that ties in really well to what we talked about earlier is not
yeah,
being afraid of failure,
yeah,
right? Because even just that simple example of how many business cards that I pass out,
yeah,
one of those events is a failure.
yeah,
You only pass out 10, you pass out 30 at the other one. Like, you can't be afraid. I meet so many young entrepreneurs, especially, who get caught up in the, oh, well, this didn't work out, so this is a
yeah,
failure.
yeah,
And then they internalize it. I'm a failure.
yeah.
It's like, no, 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 no. This is just part of the process. This is
I
part
don't
of
know
the
how
process.
many times we tell that failures are a stepping stone, but yeah, philosophically that's true. But I think the magic is the science of extracting the learning from the failure and leveraging
Mhm.
that forward. If it's through, improving conversion metrics, or if it's through the relationships that you've maintained and have built you forward, which you shared about at the beginning. I haven't figured out how to get that across. I think I'm failing teaching this to my daughter and son, and I'm still working on that. So, if we've helped our audience in any way to take that leap of faith, then we did a good job today. Jon, believe it or not, we're out of time. I have one question, incredibly difficult and personal question. It's the only scripted question that we ask every single member that guest that joins us. If you had to go back to 20-something-year-old Jon, what would you advise him?
That's a great question. And I mean, there's obviously a million things I would want to say. Most of them, most of the time, is stop being stupid. Uh, but really, the number one advice I would give is always choose to be good. And this is something I tell my son a lot, even though he's only 2, is you need to choose to be good because you're going to have so many opportunities to be bad, so many opportunities to be selfish, to be um, hurtful or spiteful or vengeful. Um, but if you just choose to be good, choose to care, people are human. And, I don't feel like I'm a very vindictive person generally. Um, but I always feel like I could have been nicer to that guy, or I could have said that in a better way. Those are kind of the regrets that I have. And choosing to be good, choosing to be kind, I think is ultimately going to be a lot better in your life than choosing to just say how you feel right now.
Jon, this has been absolutely delightful. Thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.